Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for attending the fourth session of the workshop on enhancing responsible business in Southeast Asia. This webinar series is jointly organized by the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Before we begin, please allow me to share some housekeeping issues. The Chatham House rule applies to this webinar. To pose questions, please use the Q&A function. Do identify yourself. Please share your name and institutional affiliation. To raise any technical problems, please use the chat function. Thank you for your cooperation. We will now begin the webinar on delivering post-COVID recovery and fighting inequalities by sustainable finance. This webinar will be moderated by Dr. Cassey Lee. Dr. Cassey, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning. I am Cassey Lee, Senior Research Fellow at the Yusof Ishak Institute. And on behalf of our institute and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, I would like to welcome you all to this morning's webinar. This morning's webinar, the theme is delivering post-COVID recovery and fighting inequalities by sustainable finance. Now, we all know that amidst the pandemic times, the finance sector plays an important role in driving more responsible, sustainable business practices to achieve goals such related to environment and social inequality. So therefore, in current times, it's very urgent for the finance sector to engage businesses, governments, investors, and civil society to work collectively to protect people and jobs, as well as work towards a more sustainable recovery pathway. In this webinar, we will discuss the role of the finance sector in all these issues. Each speaker will be given 15 minutes to present their views. This will be followed by a Q&A. Let me remind you, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. Chat function is used to raise technical issues. Because time is quite limited, I would suggest that if you have a question that pops into your mind, please immediately post it, because towards the end, we usually run out of time. Sometimes we are not able to sort of like answer some of the questions that are posed much later. For this morning's webinar, we have three well-qualified and eminent speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Youngho Chang, who is currently Associate Professor of Economics at the School of Business, the Singapore University of Social Sciences, Singapore. He specializes in the economics of climate change, energy and security, oil and the macroeconomy, economics of electricity, market deregulation, and education for sustainability. Our second speaker is Mr. Sylvain Augoyard, who is currently Vice President of Asia Sustainable Finance at the WWF Singapore. He works with the financial sector stakeholders to strengthen their ESG integration capabilities, leads the team's work with central banks and supervisors, and he's also the author of the Sustainable Banking Regulations in ASEAN, Raising the Bar report, which was published in December 2019. Our third and final speaker is Dr. Sukich Udindu, who is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the SEAMEO Regional Center for Sufficiency Economy Philosophy for Sustainability, based in Thailand. He is very well known for his work in CSR and has long served the CSR community in Southeast Asia. With that, let me begin by inviting Dr. Youngho Chang to begin his presentation. 15 minutes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman, for kind introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to this very timely and important webinar. Today I will present how credit guarantee scheme can serve as financial pipelines for startup business, how it can help startups in Southeast Asia succeed. So this is what I'm presenting today. Brief introduction, including objective of study, what literature say about credit guarantee schemes and startup business, and methodology is followed. Then I will review how the credit guarantee scheme worked in other countries, namely Germany, Italy, Japan, and South Korea. Now I move to the closer region in Southeast Asia, status of credit guarantee scheme and evaluate them, and I will conclude this presentation with some policy implications. Okay. Digital disruption to all sectors in the economy have already suggested that new firms with a new viable business solutions very much needed. So many startups were established to provide solutions to address those changing business needs. Collectively, startups can contribute significantly to an economy through the job creation, growing economy, and productivity improvement. However, startups experience a severe funding gap. It is not different in Southeast Asia. Sorry. Okay. So this is objective of study. We explore the effectiveness of using what we call credit guarantee scheme to alleviate startups and small and medium enterprises credit constraint so as to nurture the growth of startups. Through the showcasing 4 successful credit guarantee schemes and reviewing the 7 Southeast Asian cases credit guarantee scheme, we try to present CGS can be a potential financial pipeline for startups, and it will help. Why startups have difficulty accessing adequate financing is well known. Basically, the asymmetric information between lenders and borrowers. And also is cost inefficiency due to a small loan size and insufficient acceptable collateral or the higher interest rate. In addition, the regulatory reform already difficult, even for difficult. Those are the sources of finance for startups, mainly the owner savings. About 80% of startups are financed by own savings. Other financial pipelines include credit guarantee or grant, soft loans, microcredit, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, or business angel, or even venture capital. Except the credit guarantee, all provide financing directly to the startups. Okay, and what is a credit guarantee? Credit guarantee mechanism involves facilitating and enabling finance indirectly through its commitment to the source of fund. According to the World Bank, credit guarantee scheme provide third-party credit risk mitigation to lenders through the absorption of a portion of the lender's losses on the loans made to SMEs in case of default, typically in return for a fee. Okay. Then what the literature say about credit guarantee scheme and startup business? But first, what are the startups? Startups, by taking the European Startup Monitor's definition, it has 3 criteria: 10 years or younger, and future innovative technology or business model, and finally, the strive for significant employee or sales growth. Okay, this shows how heterogeneous Southeast Asian economy according to the income level. Okay, Singapore is highly while others are either middle or low income. Okay. Then these are the two successful examples of startups. Okay, Grab and Tokopedia. So we don't need further elaboration on this. And this is the financing gap in Southeast Asia. Okay, for example, Philippines is about 70. Financing gap is the micro and small medium enterprise finance gap over GDP. Is the definition. Philippines is about 70%. Other countries about 20%, or sometimes some countries below 10%. Okay. Okay. How credit guarantee scheme worked in other countries? Okay, we take some comparative analysis by taking 4 countries, Japan and Korea, Germany, Italy. Okay, why we chose those 4 countries? Their mode of credit guarantee schemes are all different. All 4 countries chosen here achieve sustained period of economic growth during those time with the credit guarantee schemes. Okay, then all 4 countries classified as high-income countries. Okay, among 4 countries, Japan and Korea, the utilization rate of CGS is very high compared to Germany and Italy. Okay, here is a summary table. Year started, we can see that Japan is the oldest, 1937, and then Italy and Germany, and South Korea is 1987. Types for Germany is a corporate or private. Italy is Confid, or the Italian Guarantee Fund, in short, IGF. Japan, public. Korea, public. Reassurance available. Count guarantee is available. County guarantee for others. All 3 countries except Korea, reassurance is available for CDS. Then the guarantee coverage, no country cover 100%. Maximum 80% and the low about 50%. Okay, so these are the coverage. Guarantee fee, except Germany, Italy, Japan, and Korea has a floating, which dependent on risk classification and tenure. But Germany has a fixed processing fee plus a floating rate depending on risk sharing. And what about the CGS with a specialized program for startups? Germany, it has. Italy, no. Japan, yes. Korea, yes. But particularly Korea has Startup Nest, is designed for innovative startups. And Japan has a business assistant plaza, which is for the startups. Okay, so Italy, no. And Germany is startup funding 80 for startups. Okay, so Japan, we already mentioned there. So the oldest one is successful. Korea also, the Japan credit guarantee scheme. Okay, and Korea is some startup nest. Okay, Germany we already mentioned there. So I move through. What about Southeast Asia? Southeast Asia, we have we chose about 7 countries: Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Myanmar. Okay, income level is that, and financing gap, we already shown that. Existence of CDS, except Singapore and Myanmar, all 5 countries have a CDS scheme. So type of CDS schemes are all public, but Singapore, it does not have. Okay, so Indonesia is the first country to establish a credit guarantee scheme, and it has a business continuity plan, so it is considered working. And then Thailand has a specific schemes targeting a startup and innovative technology. So it is also helping the startup. And Singapore does not have a CDS operator. However, it has a public organization said Enterprise Singapore to provide assistance to Singapore firms, including startups, in the form of a grant. Okay, this is the Singapore case. And then the Philippines. Philippines has also the operators, but the Department of Trade and Industry established a startup ecosystem development plan to provide a platform where startups and its supporting cluster and to form a critical mass to create a settlement network of startups. Okay. And this is Malaysia. Malaysia has also the CGS operator. Okay, and it has a very comprehensive scheme for startups. The government agency, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. to nurture the Malaysia startup ecosystem in technology-related companies with the program initiated Malaysia Tech Entrepreneur Program. Okay. Now Vietnam. Vietnam has two different tiers of credit guarantee, where Vietnam Development Bank administers a credit guarantee nation widely with the remaining credit guarantee operated locally. So Vietnam has the Vietnam Silicon Valley, where the both financial support and non-financial support can be sourced. Okay. So finally, the Myanmar. Myanmar does not have specifically the CGS operator to offer guarantee to startups and SMEs, but Myanmar's credit guarantee is currently offered by Myanmar state-owned Myanmar Insurance through a partnership with the various banks. Okay, so programs such as Seed in Myanmar, the program started by Purpose Investment Manager that provide seed funding. Okay. So if you look at those countries, like Indonesia is the oldest in Asia, so it has a very specific business continuity plan. And Thailand has also specific schemes targeting startups. Singapore has Enterprise Singapore. Philippines has Startup Ecosystem Development Plan. Malaysia has Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. And Vietnam has Vietnam Silicon Valley. Myanmar is a Seed Myanmar. So all CGS is working in the region. So the young population, in conclusion, young population, a huge internal market and growing economy represent a huge opportunity for startups. Many governments already recognize this and actively supporting startups with the various incubators and accelerator program. However, as we have seen earlier, the lack of sufficient financing remains still inadequately addressed. Policymakers should consider developing a credit guarantee scheme aimed at targeting innovative startups so that those startups could access sufficient bank loans. Okay. So successful CGS rely heavily on objective and quantitative measures of appraising credit risk exposures. And also, successful CGS should have always be able to appraise the risk exposure to the borrowers instead of relying on the lending institutions. Okay. And success and sustainability of CGS depend largely on the right mix of partial guarantee coverage ratio and risk-based floating guarantee fee. These are shown in 4 developed countries cases. So with this, government would also need to fine-tune its support for CGS during period of sustained economic distress, such as COVID-19 pandemic. This is the lesson we should take from those experience. And a successful CGS should be a partnership of government, banks, insurance companies, technology company, trade association, such as the FinTech Association, leading educational institution, or even supranational organizations such as OECD or ADB. Finally, a credit guarantee scheme will make sustainable finance possible for innovative startups that can create jobs, contribute to economic growth, and improve productivity. Together with the credit guarantee scheme, successful startups will help the economy that tries to deliver post-COVID recovery and fight inequalities. With this, I will end my presentation. Thank you for your attention. If you have any question or comment, please contact me or my colleague, the Kok Waiman. The email address are here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Youngho, for that excellent and comprehensive presentation. I know there was a lot of ground to cover, and we can explore some of these issues in the Q&A. You did manage to finish 1 minute ahead of time.
Thank you.
You have saved a bit of time for the next speaker, which is Sylvain. Sylvain, please, can you proceed?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cassey. Let me just share my screen. Yes, can you see it? Okay. All right. So thank you, Dr. Cassey and ISEAS and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation for inviting us today for this webinar. And good morning, everyone. Joining us on the other side of your screen. Before we start, maybe one quick word of introduction about WWF and the work we do on finance. So as you know, we are a science-based organization, and we work across 6 thematic areas: so wildlife, forests, oceans, freshwater, climate and energy, and food systems, to achieve specific conservation goals in all these different areas. So we do a lot of conservation work on the ground. That's the origin of WWF. But we do also a lot of work that are more transversal, where we work with governments, so to influence policies and regulations that would address the issues and help us achieve our goals in these different areas. We also work with what we call markets, basically the private sector, so corporates, through different partnerships that aim at addressing the environmental and social issues and challenges that they face. And we also work with the finance sector. So that's really a very important part of the work as well, as we realize that the financial flows and that need to be channeled toward less harmful activities and toward more activities with positive impact. So harnessing the power of the financial sector, if you will, is critical to achieving the goals of WWF. Maybe one side note, last week we released the documentary called Our Planet, Too Big to Fail documentary, which is a spin-off of the Netflix series Our Planet. And it's focusing on the role that the financial sector can and should play for society, basically to achieve the Paris Agreement and our goals on the conservation of nature. So I encourage you to have a look at this documentary. It's available on YouTube and Netflix. And I think the title is quite self-explanatory and quite telling. Our planet is basically too big to fail. So in this presentation, more specifically, we'll talk about, so we'll show why the climate and environmental crises that we face are relevant for the financial sector. And we look also at, we give specific examples of actions that central banks and regulators can take. And we'll also show a couple of examples of how specific financial solutions can help address these issues. So COVID-19, it's a bit inevitable to talk about it, but unfortunately, it's a typical example of the risk that we are facing if we continue to ignore, or if we fail to act sufficiently with sufficient determination on reversing climate change and nature loss. It's a zoonotic disease, meaning it originates from wildlife, and it basically comes from wildlife trafficking and habitat destruction. And it's a well-known, unfortunately, transmission mechanism. It's also an example of systemic risk that shows how a particular risk or particular environmental issues can translate into a widespread socio-economic shock for the world. And it's an example of what multiple organizations, including here, what we're showing on this slide is the World Economic Forum. In January this year, they do annual surveys on the top perceived risk, and for the first time this year, environmental related risks were identified by businesses, civil society, and a wide range of stakeholders as the top 5 risks that we face. It also shows the connectivity between these risks, and for instance, the fact that climate change worsen biodiversity loss and can accelerate, and that these crises basically accelerate one another. So what does the science tell us about these issues? First of all, that we are losing nature at an unprecedented scale. Last week, WWF released its 2020 Living Planet report. So it's a report we publish every 2 years together with other organizations, ZSL. What we found here is, on average, there is, over the past 50 years or so, a 68% decrease in the size of populations of a range of species, more than 4,000 that are being monitored. So ranging from mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish. So it's a really significant decline that we are seeing. And previous international scientific reports, such as the IPBES one last year, basically show the reasons or the drivers for this change. So the main drivers are habitat destruction, climate change, as I mentioned, the overexploitation of species, so overfishing, for instance, and pollution. So basically, if we do not reverse these trends, what we risk is a very serious and real disruption of livelihoods. For instance, the risk is, if we continue on these trends, by 2050, we may no longer have exploitable fish stocks in Asia Pacific, or a near complete destruction of tropical coral reefs, that feeds and support the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people. So that's really significant. And conversely, if we can protect that, then we secure all the services that functioning, healthy nature and ecosystems can provide, such as food, medicinal resources, protection against extreme climate events, and so on. In terms of climate change, here again, the science is obviously very clear. I think it's not a surprise anymore, and that the effects are worsening. We're seeing in the US, in China, in Indonesia, in Australia. We see all these extreme climatic events that are unraveling. In terms of, and so one important thing that the graph on the left shows basically is that we are not on track. Now is the time actually before the climate summit for countries to strengthen, to update their commitments. But even with the current pledge, we are not going to meet the Paris Agreement objectives. In terms of financial impacts, it's also quite significant. It's obviously very difficult to model. The graph on this slide on the right comes from a report published by the NGFS. So I'm going to mention that before, it's a group of central banks, and they published a range of climate scenarios together with research institutions, and they show that there will be very significant impacts. This graph doesn't even take into account very what we call kind of non-linear events, so extreme weather events or climate tipping points, or social aspects such as migration and conflicts. So all these which are going to happen and that already happen, and that can have very important socio-economic consequences. So I mentioned the NGFS. Why? Because it's the creation of this group, of the Network for Greening the Financial System, is a very significant development in our view, in the financial sector. So in December 2017, was at the One Planet Summit, a group of 8 central banks and supervisors launched this initiative to recognizing that climate change is a financial risk and a threat to financial stability, and decided to join forces to develop measures and exchange best practices to address this issue. Using the power and their mandate as central bank and supervisors. Now you have 72 members, so it's really a very significant development, and you can see very important representation also from Southeast Asia and Asia in general. Other important, just to give you a couple of other examples, the Bank of International Settlements, which you can describe as the central bank of central banks, based in Switzerland, and released earlier this year their report called the Green Swan, Central Banking and Financial Stability in the Age of Climate Change. Green Swan risk, basically they coined that term to basically refer to potentially extremely disruptive events that could be behind the next systemic financial crisis, and they are clearly referring to climate change here. And so their review is a very detailed and very useful read. They detail how central banks can address climate change within their existing mandates. Another very significant development is from the US Community Future Trading Commission. It's the first of its kind report, and I think it's quite remarkable that this report came up in the current administration. It basically show the risk that climate change is posing and will pose in the US for the US, and it basically urges regulators and financial sector stakeholders to act more proactively to address these issues. Closer to us in Southeast Asia, I think it's very positive to see the momentum that sustainable banking practices and the fight against climate change is taking. Over the past 2 years, there has been really notable strengthening or issuance of new regulations and guidelines from regulators, supervisors, but also banking associations. And so now, actually, banks in ASEAN countries that cover 85% of the region's GDP are required to integrate sustainability considerations in their overall practices, so strategy, governance, and risk management processes. So as Dr. Cassey mentioned before, last year in December we issued this report where we basically assess the various regulations and guidelines in relation to sustainable banking that have been issued in Asia. We also look at China, and we also look at how the banks perform against these regulations. So I think in this presentation we don't have the time to go into the details of the findings, but if you want to know more, there is a link. The report is available online, or you can reach out to us. It's also possible. Quickly the theme of this webinar series is also about COVID-19 and the recovery. So I think you probably know already that there is kind of wide consensus around the need for green recovery, from academics to international organizations like the International Energy Agency, the IMF, World Bank. I mentioned the NGFS as well. I mean, central bank governors have been quite vocal as well. Unfortunately, in reality, we don't see very positive progress on this front. I mean, the European Union is currently the most advanced in terms of the portion of their recovery packages that is focusing on green sectors. But otherwise, in most other countries, it's really still heavily skewed toward carbon intensive and incumbent industries. Sorry, slides. Yes. So in practice, what can central banks and financial supervisors can do? I would say that generally speaking, in terms of how they can foster more sustainable activities, is by making sure that the financial actors better manage their risks and better understand them. So that can be through financial regulations to basically make sure that banks and investors better integrate these environmental and social considerations when they decide to finance, to advise, or to invest or to insure a particular company or project. The other side of the coin, let's say, is promoting or providing more incentives for banks and investors to finance and invest in projects that have positive impacts. So for this, it's important to define what these activities are, and the use of what we call taxonomies is important because they precisely give a list of activities that are compatible with the country or region or global goals on climate and the environment. This has to come also with stable finance standards, so that can be on green bonds, green loans, or others, together with requirements for transparency and reporting on the actual impacts that are delivered on the ground. This is to avoid greenwashing, and that can go along obviously with incentives. For instance, MIS in Singapore has incentives for sustainable green and stable bonds. And our overall, recommendation on this is that these regulations, taxonomy standards should be aligned with global goals to basically make sure that these deliver on these objectives using science-based criteria. So, making sure that it's grounded in facts and science. Not forgetting that even if you have positive impact on climate by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, you also need to, in projects and the bank financing them, should ensure that the activities do not harm the environment or people in different ways. So by referencing and following international standards on environmental and social aspects, and also very importantly to harmonize practices across countries and regions. That's very important for cross-border and international exchanges, of course. So I don't know how much time I have left, but so now I'm going to talk about specific products. So maybe quickly, and then if we have time in the Q&A, we can go a bit further on that if there is interest. But you probably know about the green bond market and more generally the sustainability themed products. It's been growing exponentially over the past years. COVID-19 obviously had an impact on the overall economy. So green bonds have taken a hit, but interestingly, social and sustainability bonds have increased during this time. Also because they were quite suited to raising financing for for activities related to the fight against the pandemic. What we wanted to highlight here is an interesting rise of what is called sustainability-linked bonds and loans over the past 2 years, which are basically products where the pricing, for instance, is linked to the company issuing the bond or receiving the loan, achieving sustainability targets. So that can be reducing water consumption, for instance, or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So there is a target, and it's a financial incentive for the company to follow it. So it's a very promising and interesting mechanism, because if the target is properly set, it can really contribute to the transition to a low carbon and more sustainable economy, and it can actually help in delivering the green recovery efforts by, if we can say, cleaning up polluting business model, reducing pollution, providing more jobs. So it's really well suited to the current situation. The other, very important type of product, and this is a scheme that WWF is promoting and has recently launched, or more of a concept, if you will, and it's coming from the realization that there is a significant opportunity and a significant gap to meet our sustainable development goals, and that there is a significant need to finance projects that deliver positive impact on the ground and that are closely tied to communities relying on nature for their livelihoods. So it's and the problem with the current situation is that this type of projects are usually considered to be too risky or generally unattractive by mainstream investors, and so there is a difficulty for these projects to scale. So this is basically trying to develop the structure to help this project to scale. So there are a lot of opportunities because these projects can improve the livelihoods and secure the livelihoods of people, depending on nature for the livelihood or economic sustenance. It can also create, the whole purpose is also to create positive impacts on biodiversity to meet our conservation objectives, to improve climate adaptation and to contribute to climate mitigation as well. And the idea is, through the financial structure, to make these projects acceptable to investors. So one example that we can give is the first project financed under the Tropical Landscapes Financing Facility, which is a rubber plantation in Indonesia. So it's part of a wider landscape, the Bukit Tinggal Pulu Sumatra landscape. which is a habitat for critically endangered species, such as orangutan and specific species of tiger. And the area also provides important ecosystem services. The problem and the situation was that over the past 20 years, half of that forest has been lost due to illegal encroachments, illegal logging, slash and burn practices for the development of oil palm plantations, among others, and poaching. So the idea was to work with the local communities, first to provide them with sustainable jobs. So the idea is to expand and improve the efficiency of the rubber plantations while conserving basically setting aside part of the concession for biodiversity conservation. So it's very significant because it provides jobs to more than 3,000 smallholders and really provide this mechanism to ensure that the set-aside area is not going to be encroached upon. So the interesting thing is that there is also a partnership with, in that case, Michelin, the French tire manufacturer. So partnering with a local, with PT Royal Distillery Utama, who is the local partner, who provides, so Michelin is basically guarantee the offtake of the rubber. PT LTU is investing in equity in the project. And then you have the TLFF loan fund, which emits sustainable bonds, which are purchased by private investors, and so that brings basically financing for the project. And you have guarantors such as USAID that reduce basically the risk for mainstream investors who are not willing to take direct exposure to that type of project. So that's an example of a project, and the idea is to try to scale these and replicate these projects. And if you want to learn more about these, there is a lot of resources available. The Bankable Nature Solution report, that is the second one on this screen, has been launched. I think it was earlier this month or late last month, and basically provides more information on this Bankable Nature Solution scheme and gives a lot of case studies as well. There is also a lot of work, done by WWF and others, on developing solutions that focus on, if I can say, land-based solutions, but also water-based or blue solutions, which basically look at how we can improve the functioning of fisheries, for instance, to help people who depend on these fisheries to have more sustainable practices. And I think that concludes my presentation. So yeah, happy to answer any question at the end of the webinar.
Thank you, Sylvain, for that interesting presentation, especially towards the end. You have very specific case studies on that. Maybe we can talk a bit about that later. Let's move on to the next presentation by Dr. Sukich, Udindu, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Sawasdee krab. Good morning from Thailand. Okay. Today, I will be talking about the other side of other speaker. Besides from academic view and NGO view, this is the business view of what it happened for sustainability. Actually, SEMIOSEP is not the business organization. We are international intergovernment organization with the work of education, because we think education is for the future, and my center is education for sustainability. But however, today I will be talking about the business sector, how do they engage to the sustainable world. The reason why business is running the sustainability, because of no business success in the world that failed. If you remember last century, the business company, they drive so hard and too fast on profit. And sometimes they destroy community and environment and the world, and they push the world to the end. If the world it ends soon and the business is gone, this is one driver that business people keep looking at how we can save the world, save the community, and then we can survive the business. Actually, the COVID-19 is very good example. You see, when they have some kind of crisis, many company, even the strong company, bankrupt all over the world. That's why if we can help each other for emerging issue, we also can save the world and also can save the company. Talking about financial, the company, for the business company, we have several ways to finance. For example, you're talking about loan from the bank. If the banking system have condition for the company, bank can be a good driver for sustainability. Loan, bond, if they come up with some kind of sustainable condition, I think the company will adjust themselves. Second, for the shareholder, the listed company in stock exchange, sometimes the shareholder, if they're interested in sustainability, it can drive company. Consumer also, if they have sustainable consumption network in some country, the consumer is the big driver for the company. They can select product or service that company can arrange themselves to fit the consumer needs. Let's get to the history of the world of sustainability. In 1992, if someone getting into that environment and development conference of the UN, the business sector is a bad guy at that time. NGO, government point the finger to the business sector that we run too fast, you maximize, the profit, and then they make the world to be in trouble. And then the UN think and said that they don't want us to give back something from profit to CSR program, but they want us to change the way we do business. When we get back, I think this is some case example of Thailand. There are several networks try to change and drive, CSR and sustainability procedure in company. I think it happened all over the world. For example, there might be some new standard, ISO 26000. They might have UN Global Compact that we have to rely on UN standard, Roundtable, OECD guideline for multinational enterprise, that if we have a trade with the EU, we have to follow the rule. So this kind of standard and guideline have shaping the movement of the company, and there are more. And if you remember several years ago, when we have Rio Plus 20, most of the people in the conference said business people is a good driver to change the world to be sustained. However, we have to do more. It's not enough. It's better, it's good, but it's not enough. So I will show you the example of Thai movement. How can we change the business sector? It's not easy. It takes time. After the conference at UN, we have a lot of dialogue on sustainability. How can we save the world? And one day, I remember our Deputy Prime Minister and some of the related minister have a small meeting in a small room with the chairperson of Stock Exchange of Thailand, the manager of Stock Exchange, and businessman, and also some civil society people. And they think if they can use the stock exchange to change the big company, and then the big company can change the small company, and the whole system, the ecosystem of sustainability will begin. So the stock exchange chairperson agreed to set up the center called CSRI, Corporate Social Responsibility Institute. Begin with promote knowledge of CSR, sustainability, triple bottom line, people, planet, profit. To all, at that time is a new concept for the company. The company always see maximize profit, but it's not sustained. That's why they have to understand about environmental effect, community effect that related to the company. If company grow up, the community around them should grow up, and then they can to reserve the environment. This is the beginning of, the CSR thing in Thailand. After that, in 2009, after a lot of people learn about sustainability, CSR, we have a new rule, regulation, a lot of new driver. This is the top executive of the company who respond on CSR department. So we think we work alone, it will not create impact. But if we can work together, it can create impact. So it begins with the volunteer from 28 company to set up the CSR club. And all, I think at that time, 700 company, biggest company in Thailand, we be a member of the club. So we together changing ourselves and try to improve our, our mindset of doing business to be sustainable. Not only ourselves, when we create sustainability in our company, it's also driving the whole supply chain. Imagine 800 companies in stock exchange. They are support SME or supply chain company product. So the driver of the stock exchange can drive to the value chain of the company. Also, they can drive the consumer to change behavior on consume the sustainable product and service. Not only people in Thailand, we also meet other like-minded people in other countries. We begin with Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. They have a network of sustainable company. So we get together and set up ASEAN CSR network. Now ASEAN CSR network at that time, the locate of the office is in Singapore. I think the office is by Kun Thomas. Thomas will be one of our speaker in the future webinar series. He will share more of the story of CSR. That you see, it begin with network and they expand to all Asia. Not only the company, analysts who, analysts can influence investor. So analysts can find some kind of statistic that you should invest. The investor should invest in the good company. So we in the stock exchange, we have ESG 100. It means environment, social, and governance. So we have a ranking of ESG 100. And ESG 100 is some guideline. It's all one guideline. We also have other things too. But this is the guideline to help investor invest in good company. You see, this is a kind of list of the good company in ESG 100 last year. It can be up and down. We do survey year by year. And you can go deeply into each company sustainable development report, SD report. The SD report mention about SDG goal, how they progress in each goal, what project related to some goal, what partnership with NGO, government. They do a lot of information disclosure in the SD report. So I think in Thailand we have we have a lot of SD report compared to other countries. That's why when people see the report, Sometimes we can work together, NGO can see in that report and try to help company do a better thing. If you see ESG, the return on investment in the black line, ESG 100, they get value more than others. Top set 50, set 100 is below that, and average, the stock exchange value is below that ESG. That's why when the stock exchange is going up, the ESG company going up more than the average. And when the stock exchange going down, the good company going down not much. That's why if you invest and finance the good company, your return on investment in the long term will be better. This is a kind of example. From CSR Club, that day 800 company, last year, the CSR Club influenced other CSR network and sustainable network in Thailand to make a bigger network. They partner with the state enterprise, the government agency, funding organization, startup, social enterprise, and many, like-minded network. So from 2009, that it is very small, 10 years later, the company, the organization that have like mind to save the world get together. However, we need some support, some knowledge from other countries, like what you say. Some academic will help this network to get better. Some NGO that already have some kind of knowledge or some example in some country will help us move forward faster. So profit, maximize profit is not a trend anymore. People, planet, profit, and sustainability will be the trend. That's why in university, we have to teach our students to see multi-dimension of future benefit. Because from the last century, we talking about, in some faculty talking about profit, some faculty talking about community and people, some faculty talking about environment and planet. Today, the education will cut across all these, function to make the world sustain. Actually, we have another 10 years to achieve SDG goal. In Thailand, most of the big company in that network really work hard on each goal. But each company has their own interest. That's why the company don't run 17 goals, but some company will run 4 or 5 goals. That's why they can work together to achieve that goal. My center, Semi-OSEP, provide education for the student in the university, get ready to work in the sustainable, education module. We also train people in the company at the work to reskill and upskill about this knowledge and SDG. Also, we begin training young, even young students in the school, primary education, secondary education, begin learning about, sustainability in their school. This is what we at Semi-OSEP try to do. Actually, what we do is based on sufficiency economy philosophy of our late King Ramadinai. I don't have much time to go deeper in that. However, we might seek partners that have knowledge in sustainability in each goal to do learning in a digital platform for the future. I think I will end my presentation here and hope we can share some Q&A in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukich, for that presentation. Particularly, I think I found it interesting when you talk about the emergence of how business people got together, building networks to basically advance SDG issues. Let me basically close this presentation section and we will now proceed to the Q&A. Please let me remind the attendees that post your question using the Q&A function and not the chat function. And if it's, we also encourage you to identify yourself, your name and institutional affiliation, so we can contextualize your question, where you're coming from. Before we take up sort of the questions from the Q&A, let me pose a few questions and give time to some of the attendees to formulate their question. The first set of questions I would like to ask is relating to impact of COVID-19, the pandemic, in terms of how it has affected the progress achieved or the momentum in terms of business practices in trying to achieve ESG and SDG goals. And this can be positive and negative, because in credit guarantee schemes, for example, some of the stimulus program that has been implemented, additional funds have been allocated through credit guarantee schemes. And perhaps Youngho can elaborate, does this scheme, does it mean that credit guarantee scheme is getting a boost? The direction, is it different from before the pandemic? In terms of green financing, for example, has the pandemic basically increased enthusiasm for green financing? I know your data brought us up to 2019, but what is your feel on the ground since then, since the early part of this year, the outbreak of the pandemic? Has there been greater interest, or has there been, because of the people talk about the financial problems facing a lot of companies, and even the low interest rate that is brought about by the monetary policy, how is it affecting various green financing initiatives? And also for Sukich, right? The pandemic, obviously a lot of businesses are facing challenges. There's a lot of, if you walk around the shopping centers, a lot of shops have been closed down. Many businesses have not survived. And those who have survived are now retrenching workers, reorienting their business, trying to extend their loans. These are challenges to companies. Does it mean it pushes the sort of ESG, SDG agenda further back? Has it become a sort of luxury item? Let's deal with survival first before we deal with environment. What's the mood, and that could the three of you basically address this? We begin in the same order as the presentation. Youngho will respond first, and then Sylvain and Sukich. Please, Youngho.
Wow, yeah, excellent questions. Okay, we all know this situation is unusual, also very hard, but that does not mean we stop like developing or starting new business or new business idea. So credit guarantee scheme ensure the good return if it is successful without any cost. So we need to create more objective and quantitative measures for appraising credit risk exposure. Okay? Then we analyze the risk exposed to borrowers rather than the lenders. So because we need to think whether this startup can succeed or not, rather than whether this startup return the money they borrow. Okay, we need to change the focus to borrowers, whether it can be successful or not. Then during even pandemic, people could have a creative idea, innovative idea. So we should promote rather than discourage. So then, as a backup, we need to balance the guarantee coverage ratio and risk-based floating guarantee. So with the developing a proper rubrics of risk appraisal, even during the pandemic, it will promote more creative ideas, start the business, yes, eventually they help the economy. Yeah, that's my thought on that.
That's an interesting challenge, because you are saying that government should not take only what's off the shelf and give additional funding, but continue to refine it. Even though in this crisis period we have like 6-7 months, please continue to revamp your credit guarantee scheme to help new businesses, startups, and things like that. That's an interesting challenge. We will then move on to Sylvain
Yes.
response. Yeah. Please.
Yeah, in terms of your question on the impact on the issuance of green products. So if you look at the data for the first half of 2020, so what you can see is quite an important reduction in the issuance of green bonds. I think that's mostly due to the economic shock of the pandemic, obviously. But interestingly, you see an increase in the issuance of social bonds or sustainability bonds, and in essence, it's simply because a lot of these bonds have been issued to raise funding to buy medical equipment or other activities which helped in addressing the pandemic and the health challenge. I think I don't have the latest data because not something that we track. We follow the developments, but it's not our core focus. But what we see is there is a new or renewed interest in transition financing. So with questions around, should we develop a new label for transition bonds, for instance, or should we build on existing schemes? So we can see this interest in basically not only financing companies that are already green or low carbon, renewable energy, for instance, but also how do we help the oil and gas sector, mining sector transition to or real estate? How do we revamp existing buildings? How do we bring companies that are not aligned with our goals of low carbon, zero carbon emissions to that level? Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Sylvain.
Yeah.
Let me pose a general set of questions, and then I will bring some of the participants or the attendees' question. I will bring it within this general framework. Now, the goal is to achieve ESG and SDG, right? These are the elements we want through the financial sector, right? How do we move forward? What are the key challenges that are faced by different parties, investors, even Sukich talked about analysts, business, banks, borrowers, lenders, central banks, international agencies, ASEAN? What kind of challenges lay ahead in terms of, for example, in terms of information, in terms of products, in terms of weather? Because we have talked a fair bit about these boundaries between the actions taken by businesses, voluntary, through Sukich talk about business network. There is also government intervention to either to incentive or hard regulation requirement firms to have financial disclosure, or through a direct funding of credit guarantee schemes, for example, or support of green financing. In this kind of, what are the key challenges looking forward, and whether there are already best practices in the region in these different areas that some of the countries can learn from, right? So this is the general context of it. And in relation to some of the more specific question posed, for example, my colleague Lee Hock An posed this following question. Yes, he's interested in the panel's thoughts on the scope and strategy of the credit guarantee scheme and sustainable finance in general in their response to crisis, something we covered earlier. Of course, countries will react to the pandemic to shut down and uncertainty created. But the environment is difficult because it's difficult to sometimes launch ventures. So sustainable development seeks to be preventive, but climate catastrophe give impetus for new kind of investment, which I think Youngho also alluded to. The opportunities are there. Because of the crisis, should the focus be expansion rather than new ventures, right? Can financing programs maintain some sort of repository of ready-go projects that get fast-tracked during crisis? I think Sylvain gave this two interesting case study. Are there inventories of projects for green financing out there that can basically take advantage of the opportunity? And in the earlier frameworks, what are the best practices for sustainable finance, for example, that have emerged in countries like Thailand? So this is maybe Sukich can sort of answer this. If we can address some of this question earlier, and then before we move to the next set of questions, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, when you said COVID-19 crisis push us back on SDG, actually not all. You can see the positive side of the COVID-19, right? If you see the sky, the sea, the forest, you will see some wildlife in the forest. Easily, they work harmony with the nature. You see the whale, the dolphin, the complete of the beach and life below land. There are something positive. You can spend more time with your family at home, working at home. That's why some positive thing happen. Another way, at the negative side, the business is quite very difficult. They have the difficult time. Imagine if the company has difficult time, do they think about SDG first or their survival first? I think most of the mood and tone of the company that I in touch with today, they are in the time of survival. However, if they are good company, how to survive, they have to do the right thing. Most of the good company try to employ the employee, not lay off. That's why you can see some model in Thailand. For example, my ex-company, they have a lot of hotel, and hotel is gone. You see, we don't know for how long. Now they begin to partnership with the hospital, because now the hospital is expand. They don't have room. Our hotel is vacant, so they begin working together or partnering with hotel and hospital. That's the idea. I just saw from the news of Thailand a week ago that Thai Airways, they cannot fly. So, but they are good at food, so they change their office to be a restaurant, and a lot of people go to the restaurant to help them. You see, they have the training. I saw some funny thing. They have a training room, so even myself can go to be trained as a steward at the house hostess for a day, something like that, and eat a good food and dress like air hostess and serve thing, and they try to find some survival scheme. Don't to lay off. First they plan innovative idea, and I think if we go to do, I think some of our colleagues doing research about how business adjusts. You see, business is the only engine in every country that will, help the country, because the government, when the business is going down, the tax is low. When the tax is low, you have to help people, and you spend a lot of money. So you borrow the future money to help the present, situation, but they don't have income. how can we make the company, this is Thai government thinking how to make the engine flow. Sometimes the government push in some money, something that we don't know how long that it takes, how long that we will have vaccine. We really don't know. And we know that we will be in turbulent time for 3 to 5 years. So in the next, approach, we don't have to have the picture of the business and the world the same thing before COVID-19. We have to get together to imagine the future. I think for 1 or 2 years, the market should rely on domestic market. How can we rely on domestic market? Because we cannot, traveling. But somehow the food, the stuff can be sent. That's why domestic market, logistic, or even we can work together in ASEAN because we close to each other. So the new economic scheme will change, I think. I don't know what it is yet because we are now doing a lot of research on that. We try to talk about this with many seminar and workshop. This is one of the workshops that we need input to hear. The most important is the young generation don't think like us. You see, your student that graduate from university cannot have a job. That's why Thai government try to eject some money to help graduate students to get some job for a year. They should have a new innovative thing, and if some country have some new innovative, invention, we can share together, something like that. I don't know yet, but
yeah, I mean that's an interesting point, especially creation for the younger generation, and that has tremendous implication for social inequality, inclusiveness, and things like that. And this also naturally leads to Youngho's response on startups versus basically expansion. I not so much as expansions as in the Sukich mentioned, even the business transformation of business models actually. Youngho, would you want to comment on that, whether credit guarantee schemes or other financial instruments can facilitate that?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Okay, this pandemic disrupt many sectors or areas of economy. However, it also create a new avenue for business, like health related or like working from home, because crisis always bring opportunity. So how we maximize or utilize the opportunity given to economy is the key. So in this case, young people can create their own job by using their own initiative. So to help them to create or venture into the business, university along with the government should provide more avenue for incubating and facilitating their ideas. Okay, that's exactly what like a Singapore government is doing. Okay, emphasize learning and teaching is one. Then how the student become more the entrepreneurship. So create. Okay, they can be an employee, but they can be their own employee. So that's why we need to help them to develop idea and change that into the real business. Okay, to do that, we need to support based on the idea. So that's why we need to evaluate how credible the idea is, and rather than whether I can get the money back. No, focusing on the creativeness and then successfulness, and then support them. That is the how we get out of this pandemic situations. So that's why I keep suggesting, provide the opportunity. With the support.
That's very vital. I mean, you have an economy where maybe office works, employment which are related to office may be limited. Companies are not hiring. Maybe the young graduates, now it's a time to become entrepreneurs, you know, to what you say, new opportunities and things like that. Sylvain, you have any thoughts on this kind of issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenge. I think we came across that survey. I think it was from McKinsey or another strategic consulting firm about many companies planning to cut to have budget cuts for their sustainability teams or projects. I think that's a reality we probably have to live with now. I mean, but hopefully this is only short term, and I think there is a despite that, there is, I think, a clear understanding that we need to address all these different issues. Otherwise it's just we are continuing to building risk in the system, and so it's not really sustainable. I think what's really important, I mean, beyond the immediate let's say the immediate measures to save jobs and keep companies running, is to really think starting now about what the longer term recovery packages will look like, because you have the immediate measures and then you have the more long-term measures that will be needed. And these measures from Ministry of Finance, from central banks, need to come with green strings attached. Basically, I mean, there is a need to ask companies to commit to certain targets, and that bring us toward a more on a more stable path. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Yeah, but there are many ways of doing that. It's just a question of political will, and businesses also asking for governments to send clear policy signals.
Okay, thank you. We have about 8 minutes left, so let's move on to the next set of questions. The question from Benjamin is a question that is a comparative analysis nature. Basically, Benjamin, basically from the presentation earlier, from presentation of Youngho, and also all the presentation talk about differences in to some extent in the financing approach in various countries, East Asia and Southeast Asia. So what is I modify the question a bit. How is Southeast Asia basically performing in the various areas compared to the frontier best practice country, right? Whether it's in East Asia or Europe. For example, in the area of credit guarantee scheme, how is Southeast Asia benchmark against the other countries that you mentioned, like Germany, and have performed very well? How far are they in terms of the quality of their schemes and their performance, the loans, the amount of loans they're giving out, and the results that we see? How far is the gap between, for example, green financing, green bonds that countries in Southeast Asia they're doing? How far is it against the best practice in other countries? And also for Sukich, right, for the business sector, how far is Southeast Asian companies, like listed companies, how are they doing compared to their more advanced counterparts in other countries which have, what is the gap like in all these different areas? And what do you think explain this gap actually? Yeah, so I know it's a difficult question. So who wants to start first? Sukich, we reverse the order.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have the statistic about
the general impression is also fine. Yeah.
Okay. But what I feel like before the COVID-19, we still far away from the leading company in EU. I think in EU, they have a good standard and good financial, green finance system, green bond, and they work, a lot of things related to their city. What I know, this is what we are trying to do. Like if we develop a sustainable city, for example, if we have a Eastern Corridor, Eastern Economic Corridor, we want to create an Eastern Economic Corridor to be green, not to be industrial park and something like that. But cannot find the huge investment, and so we thinking about creating a green bond or sustainable bond. However, in the process of thinking of sustainable bond, it took some very difficult to discuss. Not only Thailand but other ASEAN, financial instrument company. It's very difficult, but they will have something from Europe. In some bank of Europe have had a good idea that easily to talk with. That I think that before the COVID, but after COVID, I'm not so sure. I think in the world we will have the same problem. Sometimes in Europe might be has bigger problem than us today. But we are not, we are not rely on financial. Most of the company rely on the fund they have themselves. Somehow this might be converse, reverse in some
Okay, if I ask you to give a 1 or 2 sentence, very quick response. What is the disclosure standard in Southeast Asian countries for corporation on compared to the frontier best practice? How far is it? 2 sentences.
It's quite far because looking at SD report, compare the number of SD report in each country, I think it's still far away from people in the other side of the world. But if we help each other disclose the information in this region, it will be, useful for the future.
Okay, Sylvain,
So it's a very complex question, I guess, because there are many things that we could touch upon. But I mean, to echo what Dr. Sukich was saying, I agree. There is a need to improve, performance, disclosure, reporting in the region. And what's important in our view is that what is being disclosed is can be used by investors, for instance, and Dr. Sukich mentioned the EU sustainable finance work, and EU investors basically will have to be using the EU taxonomy that was released this year to basically report on how aligned they are, and when they market a green index or green investment products, they will use this definition. So that has become the dictionary that they use, and companies in Southeast Asia, banks, and across the world basically, need to also think about reporting against this. And obviously, it's difficult if that's the only incentive. So we are also, working with government policymakers, to push for disclosure systems, standards which are aligned with this taxonomy. Or at least that can be compared. Taxonomy has what calls common design principles, basically listing specific steps that can be taken for an investor, again, to be able to use information that is being disclosed by companies in the region. That's very important.
But in terms of total loans and or funding, the amount in Southeast Asia, in terms of that loan, green loans, compared to the total loan portfolio in Southeast Asia, do you have any idea what's the gap like between Southeast Asia and other countries?
That's still small. I mean, globally, I think the green bond market is just a bit less than 4% of the total market. I think.
Okay.
So it's obviously it's growing much faster.
Yeah.
But if you look at the total stock, it's still small. And I don't have the figures for Asia Pacific, but I suspect it's even lower. Although China is obviously is one of the key players. So maybe that's maybe what I don't have the figure for Asia Pacific, so I actually don't want to say anything.
Okay. maybe we move on to Youngho.
Okay.
Credit guarantee schemes, comparing
Yeah.
East Asia, Southeast Asia. What's the comparison like, and what explains the differences?
Okay, for the fourth case study I shown from Germany, Italy, and Japan and South Korea, they shows the very successful operation of a credit guarantee scheme. So that we have to learn from benchmarking those successful starters and bring them into in Southeast Asian context. So again, we need to have a clear definition of the startups and how we support the credit guarantee. Okay, credit guarantee scheme must focus on borrower side rather than the lender side. And then we need to evaluate whether this idea can be successful and fully bloomed. Okay, so that's so far the 7 countries in Southeast Asia I have chosen here still ongoing. So we need to evaluate how well they perform. So that's like our next stage. In terms of the green finance, it's like green bond is flourishing because China is a leader in ISEAS-Pacific, Japan is another. But from in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia has issued a green bond. Green bond is attractive. Typically, the interest rate is very low. So green bond is another way. So right now, the green bond buyers are big companies or big investment bank. So if we link green bond to the mutual fund, we can diversify and increase the demand base. That will promote more green bond issued and reach it to the more people. So that will make a green financing scheme. But one thing we have to note here, we have to define what is green. We have to think it's greenwashing. Like a company pretend they're green, but actually not at all. That is another. My final point is MAS already formed global central bank consortium called the Central Bank and Supervisors Network for Greening the Financial System. MAA is one on a founding member. So we have to expect the central bank do some role and here for green financing.
Okay, we are now it's 11:03 in Singapore, so we have 3 minutes above the budgeted time. So I want to sort of like extend the discussion by 2 more minutes. So that means if you can give a very short response to the last question posed by Siwage, my colleague here, I will kind of tweak it a bit different. What is the role of small firms, small SMEs versus the large firms, the comparative role and their contribution, its challenges to supporting SDG as well as ESG. So if I can invite each panelist to give very short response, starting from Sukich, and then we'll move on to Sylvain and then Youngho. Sukich, I know you were smiling a lot. Quick response.
Okay.
1 minute. Yeah.
Okay. Don't think of big or small company.
Yeah.
Even yourself, your family, or even your startup and SME can do SDG in day-to-day life. Don't think about big picture, big project. Everything you can do at home. You don't use plastic. You can help each other. You can do a lot of things day to day. So it depends on yourself.
Yeah.
The smallest unit. Don't talk about big things. Going from the small thing.
Okay, and that's a good response. I like it. Sylvain, quick response.
Yes, I mean, I think it's not one against the other. They probably need to work together. I mean, small companies usually in the supply, can be the supply chain of larger company. For instance, I think the question Unilever was mentioned. Unilever is going to work with smaller suppliers, and then who are going to work with smallholders. And so all of these parties need to understand how they relate to each other and how they can support each other. So, yeah.
Okay, I think more research needs to be done on that. Not just studying GVC from a manufacturing productivity perspective, but from a green perspective, the linkages, the network. And finally, Youngho.
Yeah, okay. I think we need proper rubrics of evaluating the risk. Also, whether the project is environmentally friendly ones. Okay, we need a proper rubrics for evaluating, also the making decision. So decision criteria must be objective and transparent. So with that, there's no distinction between big company and small companies.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have to apply the same rule to regardless of size.
Okay.
Okay. My final comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all fellow panelists. This has been wonderful and I think informative. Let me sort of like let me thank you all for spending your time to give us your view. Let me just make a housekeeping announcement. Our next webinar, this is the 4th in a series of 6 webinars, right? And the next one will be on the 30th of September, the topic of business imperative of environmental protection. So we'll go even deeper into environmental issues. The time will be the same, Singapore 9:30 a.m., Tokyo 10:30 a.m. That's the starting time. So please join me in thanking the panelists. I will clap my hand here, and I know we cannot hear the participant. So thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
And
excellent moderation.
Yes, I hope to see you all again in the next webinar. And until then, please take care and have a pleasant day. Goodbye. With that, I close the webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.